We have our hands on the newly released Supermassive created Dead by Daylight game, the casting of Frank Stone. And you just know this is going to be messed up as all hell. And that's exactly the sort of games we love here on the channel. Now before we begin, if you're familiar with Until Dawn or the Dark Anthology games, then you'll know that the story that takes place within these games can vary from person to person based on the choices that you make within the game. However, I feel that the casting of Frank Stone is probably one of the few games made by Supermassive that I think has a canon ending. I won't spoil why I say that just yet, but we'll be telling the story that leads to this particular ending, making the suitable choices to do so, and I'll explain why I think it's the intended one when we get there. I've also played through a vast majority of the decisions that you can make throughout, and once we're wrapped up, I will show you some of my favourite deviations and also the secret endings and possible detours for big choices. And of course, we will cover every single piece of evidence and lore found throughout. It does go without saying that this video will contain massive spoilers for the casting of Frank Stone. If you want to play it yourself without knowing anything, then click off the video now, play the game your way and come back here and watch afterwards. With that being said, let's get into the video. We begin with the narration from a mysterious hooded woman, stating that she has given everything in search of the world that was once whispered to her in a story that she heard centuries before. A timeless power, infinite in knowledge and hunger, the entity, found within a realm so close to ours but just outside of reach, until she found Frank Stone, her killer and key. She mentions that her name is Augustine Lieber, and that she will change the world forever. We're now cut to our story's beginning, and there is nothing like a dog cam to get us started as we see a man sitting at a workbench, working on a steel helmet. The dog gets his customary head pat before we hear the cries of a baby in a nearby room. The man goes to check on the baby while our dog friend heads outside and looks at the dead rat on the ground. Within the same frame is a newspaper, mentioning a current police hunt for missing infants. I'm sure it's completely unrelated to the baby crying 10 seconds ago. A police car begins to pull up to the destination, the Cedar Steel Mill, beginning our story in 1963. The nearby security guard is sleeping on the job. Classic. Before our police friend Sam Green announces himself, we come to learn that the security guard, whose name is Tom Holt, is the only person guarding the steel mill, along with his canine companion, Merlin. Sam questions how Tom and Merlin can secure an area as large as the steel mill with just the two of them, something Tom believes that they do just fine. We learn that Sam's captain has loaned him to the local sheriff, Sheriff Kusich, for additional manpower during the missing infant investigation. Sam asks Tom if he has seen anything suspicious around the mill over the last few nights or weeks, to which Tom replies that everything's been fine, and to ask Sheriff Kusich if he doesn't want to take his word for it. This surprises Sam as Tom mentions that Sheriff Kusich actually dropped by the previous night, asking Tom the very same questions about the missing child. Tom reinstates that there is no possible way that the child could be here at the mill without Merlin and himself knowing about it. Turns out that the sheriff took his word for it and just simply left without further investigating the mill, not to mention that Tom and the sheriff have some beef, stemming from the fact that the sheriff has addressed Tom as a lumpkin ever since Tom reported seeing a UFO in 1954 that just turned out to be a blimp. Tom had no idea what the word meant until almost a decade later going to the library to ask, finding out that lumpkin is just another word for an idiot, and the sheriff has been calling him that to his face for the last 9 years. Tom doesn't believe that Kusich is deserving of the sheriff position, and invites Sam to investigate the steel mill, saying that Sam is probably 10 times the policeman that Kusich is. Time to get into some good old-fashioned police work. As Sam enters the steel mill, we get an ominous shot of the Cedar Lakes fishing poster within the security guard's hut with the catchphrase, "Lure him in." Sam wastes no time looking around before finding a clipboard with the steel mill employee's personal record. Unfortunately, it's pretty badly damaged from old water stains, but a few things can still be made out. The date of birth is the 17th of April 1927, putting them at 36 at current time. It notes that the address of the individual is the Singer House in Cedar Hills, and that they have quite the criminal record, including assault and robbery. They were released early from a rehabilitation centre from a sponsor and doctor at the facility. The doctor's name is marked pretty badly, but we know that it starts with an A and the last name ends with an R. Another nearby file shows the staff roster for the second week of September 1963. Now, obviously we don't know who many of these employees are, and we do know that the game is named after Frank Stone, and sure enough, he is rostered at the steel mill on numerous days throughout the week, including the day that is marked with a red circle, Friday the 13th. Now, this could just be a little bit on the nose, considering Friday the 13th is just supposed to be a spooky day in general. But it could also be a nice Easter egg or nod towards Jason Voorhees. Not a character in the Dead by Daylight universe, but a mainstream horror icon nonetheless. What is interesting is that it mentions how the workshop overseer, a Hanson Grahams, also has the address noted as the Singer House at Cedar Hills, same as the previous employee background report. A note on the backside of the roster mentions how Dawkins and Stones were moved off of the graveyard shift, since he didn't want these crews with half the manpower, and that he told the lumpkin out the front that nobody will be working nights for a while, before signing off as Hux. The use of the word lumpkin leads us to believe that the person that wrote the note is actually Sheriff Kusich, provided by the information that we learned earlier from Tom. But why would the sheriff be in charge of the staff roster here at the steel mill? And for what reason would he want less employees working at the steel mill at night specifically? Something to keep in mind. The steel mill is vast and almost puzzle-like, with the amount of buildings, rooms, boxes, and freight containers. And I must say, the noises this place makes at night adds to the creepy factor. We get inside one of the main storage buildings as Sam mentions how it smells like death in here. At the same time, sounds of crunching are coming from the other side of the building. Totally not something to worry about at all, I'm sure. Tom arrives asking about Merlin's whereabouts, as Sam points out the horrible smell, asking how Tom doesn't smell it. Tom points out that he can't smell anything anymore since he got exposed to mustard gas in the trenches. Sam and Tom go to look for the source of the smell, and come across our lost canine friend going to town on a blob of flesh, and I must say, that thing looks a lot less friendly than Tom described. Sam points out that somebody has put the meat out for Merlin to eat, asking if Tom was the one responsible. He denies it, stating that Merlin and him are a team, so who would want to come between them? Sam takes a closer look at the flesh pile and straight up finds a human ear. I think we might just be onto something here. Sam wraps the ear up in a cloth and mentions to Tom that they need to continue looking around the complex. They stumble upon a grate heading down into the furnace tunnel area that is lit up with lights. Sam uses a nearby crowbar to pry that bad boy open. He gives Tom his car keys, asking him to radio the station requesting backup at the steel mill, and also gives him the human ear to hold on to give to Sheriff Kusich. Now I'm just going to interject here a little bit. Up until this point, I think that Sam has been doing some great old-fashioned police work. But you just found human remains, my man, and you were standing next to the only person working at the facility who told you with no uncertain terms that he would know if something was happening at the steel mill. Tom should be suspect number one at this stage, but Sam has given him the keys to his cop car, the very piece of evidence needed to begin an investigation, and if he's the killer, he now has every means to cover this thing up. But we'll just trust him, I guess. Sam heads down below in the tunnel system alone, because waiting for backup is overrated, and gets weird sewer juice all over his police cap. See, this is the first fatality from this silly decision making, Sam. Now capless, Sam continues through the tunnels, finding some collectibles along the way, including these little chess piece sized thingies. These collectibles are all fun connections to Dead by Daylight add-ons, not to mention straight up dolls of killers. Sam can find the Hillbilly doll in the tunnel system, a connection to Max Thompson Jr., or better known as the Hillbilly Killer, that is within the entity's domain. If you aren't familiar with the Dead by Daylight lore, we'll be getting into that as we get further into the story for some context. We see some symbols drawn on the walls. This one seems like a hammer of some kind, as well as items that have been left around in the tunnels. Sam stumbles across this amulet with a woman's picture within it. Most likely a killer's memento, since a lot of killers tend to enjoy collecting items from previous victims, normally storing them where they live or carry out the murders. This tunnel really is full of some great surprises. Totally shouldn't have waited for backup before coming down here. Sam finds a ladder that leads up into the furnace room, ominously filled with a dim red light. Looks pretty badass for a serial killer base, I must say. We can hear the cries of a baby as a mysterious person watches Sam from nearby. Now, if this was me, my head would be on a swivel so bad that it would look like my head was doing 360s, so I don't for the life of me understand how Sam doesn't see this guy just standing there. He makes his way up towards the cries, gun drawn and still blind as hell to the guy standing 6 feet from him in a Mad Max getup. They get into a fight, and to Sam's credit, he really holds his own, managing to get the steel mask off his head. We can see that this is the same guy from the beginning sequence, and you could probably guess, Frank Stone. Frank manages to impale Sam through the shoulder as he moves quickly towards the child on the walkway, with a mysterious hooded figure watching from above. Adrenaline is a hell of a thing as Sam pulls himself from the steel, but for some reason it's not strong enough to use his perfectly unhurt legs to walk to the gun, and instead opts to crawl for dramatic purposes, deciding only to stand up once he reaches the gun, putting one round through Frank's shoulder and one between the eyes. This causes Frank to fall below into the furnace floor of hell, and that is one terrible way to die, I must admit. Sam falls unconscious as the fog gathers around the dead body of Frank Stone. As the camera pans up towards the roof, we see giant spider legs watching over. This is the Entity, a godlike being that is responsible for creating the trial grounds that survivors and killers must participate in an endless cycle as seen in Dead by Daylight. We cut to a young woman called Madison, awaking in her bed clearly having had a nightmare, taking a good old drink of water to calm the nerves. But guess what, lady? The nightmare isn't over yet, because that sure as hell isn't reality. We can find a photo of Maddie and her mother on a nearby table as we attempt to leave the room. We can see that her mother is down the hallway, but this isn't any normal hallway. It's an endless cycle, returning Maddie to the same room as before, but just a little more decrepit. The photo of her mother has now been scratched around her face, another nod towards the scratches seen within the Entity's realm when survivors are being tracked. The cycle continues, just like trials, more scratches, and more damage. When Maddie finally reaches the outside, we can see the scratches on the floor where she walks, showing that she is within the Entity's realm. She finds a campsite with a television in the middle. It's nothing but static, but it helps drown out the cries behind her. It turns out to be her mother, and Mama Bear is not doing too well, Maddie. Not well at all. Maddie awakes on a plane carrying a small container. I'll be honest, when I first saw the scene, I thought it was some Inception type crap, since the plane has no lights inside at all and every seat is empty. But it's actual reality, much to my surprise. Turns out that Maddie is arriving in London. A while later, we see a very remote country road of which Madison is driving down. She takes a look at a note which gives us some insight as to her business here in London. There is an invitation card here for an audience with a woman called Augustine Lieber, requesting Madison to travel to her manor on Friday the 13th of September. Yet another reference to Friday the 13th. It is for an evening of mutual opportunities and spiritual enrichment, whatever that means. They were even nice enough to pay for the flights and travel expenses. A detail I love is the fact that the border of the invitation card is just filled with branches and legs that we saw earlier from the Entity. You gotta love foreshadowing. As we continue going, we can see somebody has broken down on the side of the road. This is never a great decision to make during the night on a country road. On one hand, you're picking up a serial killer. On the other hand, you've just abandoned a person on a country road at night alone. It's a lose-lose. Maddie decides to be a good Samaritan and pull over. Turns out the woman is also American, and the car is a broken down rental. Oddly, she is going to the Gerant Manor, the same as Maddie. We come to find out that our mysterious hitchhiker is from Oregon, much like one of Maddie's mothers. Maddie, on the other hand, was born and raised in New York, and has never been to her mother's birthplace of Oregon. We have a nice, long-winded, standard, awkward conversation before our ride-along introduces herself as Linda. Maddie asks about the manor that they're both going to, and why Linda is going there. It turns out that Linda was also invited for a private audience with Augustine Lieber at the manor. And speaking of the manor, it is exactly what you would expect from a creepy backwoods horror location. It ticks all the boxes. Much like the invitation card, the gate is detailed with all of our favourite spider legs, along with the accents on the front door. Both further references to the Entity. The lights within the house are turned off, and nobody is answering the door, so we just let ourselves inside. Now, I understand that we were technically invited here, and they should be expecting us, but this feels like a really good way to get shot for home invasion. Just saying. While looking around, Maddie points out just how creepy this house is, pointing out that this is usually the time that a guy rushes up from the basement with a chainsaw. Linda jokes back that they were invited for a reason, and it's unlikely that the host wants their faces for leather masks. Now this is incredibly on the nose, but this is in reference to Bubba Sawyer, better known as Leatherface, originally from the horror franchise The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but is also coincidentally another killer that is currently found within the Entity's domain. A torn note can be found that shows a sequence of musical notes called the Survivor's Theme, something Maddie points out that even she could play because it's pretty basic. There are also a few other things of note lying around, such as a business card, Bruno Stanford III, business connoisseur. Behind all ideas is a plan, and behind all great ones is Stan. Oh, dear God. The next is a note addressed to Mrs. Lieber. It mentions how Lieber has asked her staff to leave and vacate the premises ahead of the meeting tonight. It mentions that the visitors are all collectors, with a shared interest to Lieber, giving us our first insight into just who Maddie and Linda are. We find a nearby piano and play the Survivors theme that we saw before. Opening a hidden passage. One dark and very gloomy red passageway later, and we find ourselves another doll. This time Anna, or otherwise known as the Huntress, another killer currently stalking the realm of the entity. We head inside the meeting room, finding a man waiting for us. He introduces himself as Stan, and it turns out that this is our business connoisseur from earlier, Bruno Stanford, and nobody is a bigger fan of Stan than, well, Stan. You could say that Stan stands Stan. Alright, I'll stop. He immediately recognizes Linda, calling her by her full name, Linda Castle, stating how much of an honor it is to meet her. It turns out that Linda is a filmmaker, having directed a variety of successful horror films, something that Stan is very familiar with. We take a moment to look around while we wait for Augustine to join us all, and we can find some pretty interesting things. On a nearby shelf is a book called The Epic of Gilgamesh. Now, the Epic of Gilgamesh is an actual poem that was discovered in real life, speaking about Gilgamesh, the king of Uruk, who lived sometime between 2100 and 1200 BC. An interesting tie-in here is the fact that some of the stories were in Akkadian, and Akkad culture was featured prominently during the Dark Anthology's title of House of Ashes, so we also have a nice little nod here also. The book has passages of the poem highlighted with small notes written beside them, presumably by Augustine. Now I will summarize, since a majority of this isn't particularly useful to the overall story, but the notes written within the book are addressed to a person named Norman on multiple occasions, telling him to pay attention to the highlighted verses, as they are lessons to be learnt within each of them. The same lessons that Enkidu tells Gilgamesh, that while you might have the strength to fight barehanded, there is strength in weapons to complement his power, and how mercy is not the answer. You must look beyond the act of mercy, and understand that sparing a demon would only undo a hero's righteously won victory. Only through violent demonstration can you stir the watching gods to notice you. There is no room for mercy in the pursuit of glory, and the heavens will not open for a champion that shows restraint. It is clear that Augustine is trying to teach someone named Norman a philosophy, and using the poem to form a kind of religious baseline within Norman. We can find a movie poster for a film called Murder Mill inside a nearby cabinet. This excites Stan, and he also points out that Linda Castle's name is on the poster, showing that she was one of the people involved in its creation. Linda states that it was one of the first things that she ever worked on. Super low budget, and nobody on the film knew what they were doing, pointing out that she wished that it actually never saw the light of day. Stan mentions how Murder Mill was only screened on a few occasions, and each time the audience watching flew into a rabid, murderous rage, causing the film to gain a cult-like legendary status. Linda jokes that they were likely just bored out of their minds, and that the stories are just fairy tales. Stan rebuttals that Linda must be under a non-disclosure agreement, since he heard that the government gathered and destroyed every tape of the film after the incidents. But the rumour is that they kept a single tape that the CIA uses, to this day, for enhanced interrogation at Larry's Memorial Institute. But I'll be honest, I would take what Stan says with a grain of salt. The power to the manor comes back as Augustine enters the room. She offers everybody a drink, something that Stan and Maddie are happy to accept, but Linda declines, stating that she has never had a drink in her life and doesn't plan on it now. When Maddie receives her drink, the cup given to her by Augustine sure is familiar. Do you remember when Maddie had that nightmare and took a sip of water after she woke up inside her other nightmare? That's the same damn cup. Stan finally reveals why he was invited by Augustine, and it is because he is in possession of a segment of the original camera shot celluloid of Murder Mill, with the intention of selling it to Augustine for a small fortune. As it turns out, Linda also has a segment of the film, as does Maddie. Augustine helps place Maddie's piece of film into the bowl with the others before Linda asks what will happen if she refuses to sell the piece. Augustine asks Linda, after 40 years of pain, why she would choose to live with more, clearly showing that there is some trauma associated with Murder Mill for Linda specifically. Augustine takes her leave and invites the three visitors to continue making themselves at home in the meantime. We cut to a shot of the steel mill as Augustine narrates over. She speaks about the night at the furnace room in 1963, how close they were, that she could feel the entity's force pulsating through the steel mill. But it was only Sam Green's petty act of bravado that ruined everything, resulting in her key being mangled and the ritual disrupted. However, Frank Stone didn't die that night, as his essence was seared into the very foundations of the steel mill, creating an endless nightmare, and all she needed to do was find a way to awaken him once again. We now see a young man clearly acting on film, and boy, when I tell you that the acting is corny as all hell, I mean it in the hilarious kind of way. This is just true perfection. I really do mean it. We hear the director call cut, and we are introduced to Chris and our incredible actor, Jaime. Chris turns to ask how the shot was, and guess what? It's none other than a young Linda Castle. She is the camera woman and is very passionate about the craft of movie making. Chris and Linda have a bit of a dispute about the blood and arm gag within the shot, since Linda didn't focus on the arm, instead prioritizing Jaime's acting. A bold choice. Chris wanted the fake arm and blood to be more in focus. This leads to them having to do a retake of the scene, to align more with Chris's vision when they're interrupted by our favourite police officer, Sam Green, who is a little bit older now. Unfortunately, Linda accidentally drops the camera when she gets spooked by Sam entering the shot. We learn that Sam is now the sheriff, and he asks what the teenagers are doing here, after he's told them multiple times to stay away from this place. He is less than pleased that they're filming a movie within the condemned steel mill, and tells them once again to leave, and to never step foot back here at the Cedar Steel Mill. The group reluctantly agrees and leaves, with Sam telling them that he will keep an eye on them. We get a shot of the much more decrepit steel mill, now that it's been condemned for decades. We also get a familiar panning shot showing us the same fish poster within the security guard's hut. However, the catchphrase has changed from before, now showing keep 'em hooked instead of lure 'em in years ago, a sign that the steel mill might have its hooks in Sam Green more than we thought. The group arrives back home and are panicking about finishing the movie now that they can't film their final shots at the steel mill. We get to see the official merch that the group is sporting. Murder Mill staff tops. Purple, blue and red writing. Interesting choice. They take the film out of the broken camera and Chris begins complaining about Sheriff Green, saying if he has anything better to do than just guard the steel mill. Linda brings up about the serial killer that was found in Cedar decades ago, Frank Stone, who carried out his murders at the steel mill, stating that there was a long list of disappearances, kidnappings and murders around that time. Chris is immediately interested, playing around with the idea of implementing him in some way into the movie, since they filmed at that location, not to mention the publicity that the movie will now get, seeing that it's filmed at an actual serial killer's murder site. This could be their big break. However, Chris gets pummeled back to reality when she remembers that their camera is now broken, meaning they couldn't finish the movie even if they wanted to. Jaime wants to head to the drugstore to get the camera fixed, but they no longer have the budget after Chris spent it all on those crew t-shirts. Jaime's sister Bonnie comes into the garage after arguing with their father. Bonnie is upset that she is being treated like a maid by her father after their mother got sick. Jaime tries to compliment her but is quickly called out by Bonnie since he only does this when he needs something from her. Jaime asks Bonnie for $20 to fix the camera, which she agrees to so they can finish their film, but asks to claim the garage for the night as payment. The group agrees and gets their $20. They waste no time and head into town. Jaime begins complaining about shoulder pains since they did the scene earlier, wondering if it was just something in the fake blood. I personally find this interesting, since it's the exact same spot that Sam Green was impaled at the steel mill. And if you're at all familiar with Dead by Daylight, this is the normal spot for people to get hooked. The group needs to make a decision between going to the drugstore without the certainty that they will even know how to fix the camera, or to check out the Curiosity store across the street. They decide on the Curiosity store, and luckily they have a variety of camera parts available. The store clerk arrives and allows the group inside and tells them that she believes she has exactly what they are looking for behind back, and to just have a look around. Now this place has some very interesting items, and how this shop clerk obtained them is, well, odd to say the least. Firstly is a bunny mask, which actually belongs to Anna, the huntress killer within the entity's domain. And that's not all. she also has this weapon sitting on the desk made from a skull and spine. This belongs to Philip Ajomo, the Wraith Killer within the entity's domain. There's also a smiley pin, which is probably in reference to the add-on of the same name found in Dead by Daylight, used by the Legion Killer. A television can also be found, similar to what Maddie saw within her dream. It seems to show a corridor in an old building of some kind. Finally is a note dated the 4th of September 1980. It speaks about the sale of the previous store, Ned's Nutty Nednacks, and it turns out that the store was only just recently bought, quite a bit below asking price, but the writer, Straker, mentions how due to the previous owner's dire financial situation, that it would be best for them to sell the property swiftly. Not to mention that the previous owner had been dealing with a large amount of hardships recently, fires, theft, and even the murder of his cat Belinda at the very same store. Interestingly, the police force will not be investigating the murder further, since they lack the expertise in the behaviours of crows to track the culprits, a suggestion that crows might be responsible for Belinda's death. Not to mention that we also have ourselves a crow statue only a few feet away. We also know that crows are commonly used by the entity as eyes, to scout out new survivors and killers for its domain. It does really have to make you think if all these hardships really were random. Some film reel and another creepy doll can be found within the store, this time of Evan McMillan, the trapper killer within the entity's domain. The store owner returns with a camera from out the back. Chris points out that it's a little bit on the older side, but conveniently, exactly $20. We try to haggle with the store owner, but she is unwilling to budge on the price, instead offering an extra to go along with the camera, a pocket mirror, said to bring luck. Chris isn't all that excited by the new addition, but thinks that they could maybe find a place for the pocket mirror as a prop within the film instead. Whoa, don't just leave your old camera behind, what the heck? I get it's broken, but it's not just worth leaving there for free. I won't give any context just yet, but take a little look behind the store clerk. We can see a picture on the wall with the words, "A traveller is only as strong as its vessel." Considering the fish poster, it's good to keep track of these things throughout the story. Chris heads into the drugstore to buy some milk since she promised her mother and forgot. Inside we have some more interesting things. An article can be found that talks about the idea of cursed movies, and how a film called Caged Lips, standing Andy Dean, was one of those lost films. Cursed movies have fascinated historians and conspiracy theorists alike, believing that within the footage is a glimpse into a darker reality that can only be seen by camera. While much of it is just gossip and legend, it was the reality for the film's main actor, Andy Dean. When the film crew found his vehicle abandoned on a desert roadway with the keys still in the ignition and the cigarette lighter on the seat, he was never found, and the film footage was stored in a private vault. However, there have been eyewitnesses from people that have seen the footage of Caged Lips. Apparently, every single scene that involved Andy Dean had a strange rolling fog seen behind him, even in the desert landscape, where there shouldn't be any fog. An interesting fact to mention is that every single survivor that has ever been taken into the entity's domain first saw fog prior to being engulfed in it, and then eventually transported. So it's very likely that Andy is not having a very great time right now. At the top of the page we can see a name written on it, R. Green. On a chalkboard nearby is a pamphlet from Lightbringer Estates, mentioning how it will be transforming Cedar Hills with new homes to be built at the site of the Cedar Steel Mine. Demolition was planned in early 1981, which means that this murder mill film crew could be the last people to use the location before it's destroyed. Oddly, the picture used on the pamphlet seems to be Jaime's house that we just saw earlier. Chris never makes any mention of it, so I guess it could be a similarly built house, I guess. I don't know, it's strange nonetheless. We get our milk and see another missing child within Cedar Hills. Not ominous at all for a small town. Some space invaders later, and we finally speak with the guy running the drugstore. It turns out that this is Robert Green, Sam Green's son, and the owner of the magazine earlier. Chris fills him in on the fact that they are making a horror movie at the Cedar Steel Mill, and it just so happens that Robert is a big horror nerd. Chris invites him to join in on making the movie. He agrees to help as Sam enters the drugstore. Sam apologizes for being so stern with them back at the steel mill, saying that he only wanted them to take him seriously. Robert secretly tells Chris that he can get them into the mill without his dad knowing, if they want him to, and she quickly agrees. We get some narration from Augustine, who mentions that she has worn many masks over the centuries. stating how Dr. Augustine Lieber was renowned and trusted, and that Frank Stone confided in her. And he allowed her to unlock his potential in the psychiatric ward, but now she has a new guise, a new timeline, and a new chance. It's revealed that Augustine and the store owner at the Curiosity Store are one and the same. She gave the group the camera, but she states holds more power than the group could ever know, let alone the cruelty that awaits them at the steel mill. A few things to go over. Firstly, you may be wondering how Augustine is a young sort of 40-50 something year old in 2024 within the Manor, yet she seems to be an old woman in 1980. It's a valid thought, and we will get answers. Just you wait. Secondly, remember when Sam Green found the employee background check at the steel mill, and the employee was let out earlier from the psychiatric hospital by a doctor that started with an A and ended with an R? Yep, that was Augustine Lieber. We jump back to the Manor as the group make themselves at home. Maddie awakes from another nightmare having a little 15-minute nap, all while the others just sat there and watched her, I guess. Sure. Stan points out that everybody was holding out on each other in regards to the Murder Mill film strips. Linda replies that she merely worked on the film. She didn't direct it, and it's not even on her official filmography. Stan mentions how Murder Mill is still the most famous project that Linda ever worked on, even if it's not on her filmography. It states that cursed film collectors have been looking for any trace of the film for decades, never finding anything. But all of a sudden, 3 of them are here, right now. Stan reiterates that Murder Mill was said to cause murderous rages, dissociation with reality, and used in CIA interrogation. But it's hard to verify since so few people have actually seen it. Each of them are interested in why Augustine wants all of these film strips and decides to look around the Manor to get an idea. Another Easter egg can be found with a painting above the fireplace. The painting depicts Archibald McMillan, the father of Evan McMillan, the trapper killer. A nearby hidden room shows that Augustine takes security of the Manor very seriously. We can also find a blueprint of a room design that I must say seems pretty out of the ordinary. Linda brings up to the group that she wants to know how everybody got their piece of the Murder Mill tape. Maddie mentions that her mother died only a few months ago and found the tape while going through her stuff. Linda asks Maddie if her mother was Bonnie Rivera. This comes as a shock to Maddie since that was her mother's name, and she questions how Linda knows her mother. Linda mentions that she knew Bonnie a very long time ago and that Maddie is her spitting image. She goes on to say how Bonnie's brother Jaime was one of her closest friends. Maddie tells Linda that she never got to meet her Uncle Jaime before Linda offers her condolences to Maddie for Bonnie's death. Stan, on the other hand, is unwilling to give his story, stating that it's a very expensive one if she wants to know. Stan really is a scumbag. I like him. We head upstairs as Linda mentions that each of the paintings within the Manor looks incredibly similar, stating that there is either a very strong genetics within the Lieber family or Augustine is cosplaying. A book can be found on the desk called The Face of Evil. The author is none other than Sheriff Kusich, who has written a storybook about Frank Stone where he is trying to take credit as the person who stopped his reign of killings, even saying that he was the one that looked him in the face and pulled the trigger. I think the fake story is hilarious in comparison to what we know what happened. For example, he mentions how he always knew that something wasn't right about the steel mill, even though we know from Tom Holt that the sheriff left the mill immediately without even searching it. Not to mention he calls Tom Holt a lovable old joker, despite our knowledge that he hated Tom, calling him a lumpkin to his face for close to 10 years. Within the story, he mentions that he sent his deputy to check the mill, who we know as Sam Green, stating that he wasn't Kusich's first choice since he was out of state and a little too green for his liking. The rookie was walking into the lair of the monster, and no match for Stone, and that is when Kusich just had to act. No man left behind. Oh god, this guy. He completely takes the events that took place for Sam for himself, stating that he drew his gun and he took a deep breath and hoped his aim would strike true. Linda points out that this is just a bunch of fiction garbage, since Sam Green was the actual person that stopped Frank Stone, and all Kusich did was clean up. We find an elevator filled with hooks and vines, but can't open it without the missing piece while Maddie is speaking to herself. Well, she's speaking to her mother, stating that she has felt lost ever since her mother died, and has been in a constant nightmare since she passed. Maddie asks Linda if she can tell her anything about her mother from when they were younger. Linda says that Bonnie was the most intimidating woman that she ever met, not allowing anybody to tell her what to do. She even brings up a memory of Bonnie, something that she never told anybody before. And while so many memories of that time are blurry for her and hard to remember, she remembers this one very clearly. It was shortly after they brought the new camera. They were driving past the Rivera's house and the garage door was wide open. Inside was Bonnie completely tearing the guitar, who was completely enveloped in the moment, not thinking about anything else. Stan interrupts the story, saying that somebody is outside hiding in the woods. Linda points out that Augustine probably expected something like this to happen with all of the security that we just found earlier. The group decide to look for Augustine to inform her about the person outside, and decide to take the creepy elevator since it's really the only logical option to her current whereabouts. Meanwhile, we jump back to the 1980s with our teen group, who are having a production meeting before their shoot. Chris and Robert have been at the library getting every news article about the steel mill and Frank Stone. Chris wants to find anything regarding hotspots that Frank Stone had within the steel mill that might make for great shooting locations. We take a look and see that Frank was described by people that knew him as a loner, creep, and a bit of an oddball. Not to mention people questioning the fact that the Cedar Steel owners, the Tester family, hired Frank despite his prior police record for violence. Other news show that the mood at the steel mill was actually quite dire in the years leading up to Frank Stone's incident, with many of the workers suffering from depression, and some even ending their own lives, which shows that tragedy has befallen the steel mill, even before Frank Stone. It talks about how the mill was in a serious decline, and many employees were even laid off, so there isn't much of a surprise that they decided to shut the mill down after the Frank Stone murders, since it was probably heading in that direction anyway. A book nearby is essentially a self-help book about meditation and finding a higher state of consciousness. Within it, the author describes being able to elevate his consciousness to a point where he could visualize another Cedar Hills, a town much like our own, but different, in countless subtle ways, held behind the veil of our reality. He states that within the alternate version of Cedar, he saw a young boy called George, the son of the Calhoun family, who died many years ago. But here he was a healthy middle-aged man, reaching an age that he knew he never reached. This made him ponder what could possibly make this Cedar Hills deviate so much from the one that he knew so well, and decided he wanted to see what became of himself within this new world. But what he found shocked him. He saw himself within his home, but this time he was starving, poor and destitute, living almost like a beast. He believes that this is the version of himself if he never reached the enlightenment like he has. His conclusion is that of an omniverse. Every decision made creates a new river that leads to an overwhelming ocean. Now, if you're at all familiar with the Dark Anthology series, you will know that the butterfly effect plays a very big role within them. The idea that any decision, regardless of how trivial, will have a ripple effect on what is to come, and that there is endless possible realities that each take place from different decisions and choices made, a multiverse of a kind. And this is no different within the Dead by Daylight lore either. While the entity's domain seems to exist by its own rules, there is a lot of evidence to show that the entity is able to look between numerous alternate realities and worlds when picking survivors and or killers for his domain. It's why we see killers like Michael Myers, Chucky, Dracula, Vecna, Freddy Krueger. None exist in the same world, but are all instead brought together by the entity. We find a tape containing an interview with security guard Tom Holt. He mentions how he probably wouldn't have made it out alive if not for Sam Green, calling him a hero, calling out Kusich for stealing the credit, since he gave up on the mill unlike Sam. Sam is the reason that that baby is alive today, not Kusich. Robert chimes in saying that thanks to Holt, nobody ever questions Sam's story of events at the steel mill. The two would later become good friends, and Sam Green even read out the eulogy at Tom Holt's funeral years later. Jaime confides in Linda that he's a little worried about Chris's obsession with Frank Stone, something Linda thinks that Jaime is overreacting about. She shows Jaime the final scene of the film, which is supposed to be shot within the furnace room of the steel mill. Chris finds an article that was written before they realized Frank Stone was a murderer. Within it states a machinery shop that he had at the steel mill. Chris believes this to be the perfect place to film some shots for the movie, so the team packs up and heads out to location. Robert helps his group sneak past his father's patrol routes and gets them into the steel mill via the tunnel system. However, it seems that somebody is watching. These are the same tunnels that Sam Green went into in '63. And I just want to point out that throughout the tunnels is yellow arrows and yellow writing. This one mentioning, "This way, fellow travellers." I wonder where I remember the term traveller mentioned before. Trust me on this. Robert mentions how Sam really damaged his shoulder back in the confrontation with Stone, and that he can't use it the same even to this day, and keeps much of the events that took place here close to his vest. We continue through the tunnels and find some more interesting stuff. Firstly, another creepy doll, this time Philippa Jomo, the wraith killer within the entity's realm. We even find Sam's police hat down here after all these years. The yellow writing continues to guide the teens towards something similar to animals to a slaughter. We get a glimpse of the furnace chamber once again, when the group is currently outside, with the sacred remnants of Frank's death location still there to be seen. The group finishes up some more scenes for the film outside, but are now ready to head into the furnace chamber. Jaime, however, notices something watching nearby, but refuses to acknowledge it. That is, until it sneaks up on him from behind. Luckily, it's just his sister Bonnie, who is now rocking one of the film's staff t-shirts. Nice. Once we get inside, we can see the same pipe that Sam Green got his shoulder impaled on all those years ago. Robert takes in the whole room, realizing that this is the place where his dad came face to face with Frank Stone, saying it's different to what he imagined. The group begins their filming, with Jaime and Chris acting out the final scene in all of its corny fashion. While the crew are all happy about the final scene, Bonnie calls out Jaime for having some very interesting lines in the dialogue that mirror his own situation with his family, which results in Bonnie and Jaime having an argument. Linda separates the two by going outside with Bonnie to get some fresh air, while Chris, Jaime, and Robert stay inside. Chris wants to find the machine shop that she saw in the news article, when Robert asks her to check out Frank's death location. She begins filming the area, when some strange green particles can be seen from the camera. They have no idea what this is, but they think it will look great in the movie nonetheless. As the group begins looking for the machine shop, Jaime asks Robert if he still thinks it's weird how obsessed his father is about the steel mill. Robert agrees that Sam has been obsessed for as long as he can remember, and that his father would regularly go on long walks at night. Instead, taking those walks out here at the steel mill, where he killed a guy, saying that Sam has gotten into some more occult-like stuff recently. They find a suspended freight cart that was likely only used by Frank Stone, information that Chris gathered by the news articles. She believes that since it's still suspended, it's likely that it's never been searched by police and wants to get a look inside. First things first is getting power to the crane system. And guess what? We have ourselves a generator that looks awfully familiar to the ones found within the entity's realm. While Jaime works on the generator, Robert asks him why he never was asked to help with the horror movie. Jaime points out that it was originally only meant to be a project for himself, his girlfriend Chris, and best friend Linda. This upsets Robert, who now wonders if he is just in the way. Jaime is feeling suspicious about the amount of time that Chris is spending with Robert. And I'll be honest, it's just a bunch of typical teen romance dramas that we've all seen before. Chris comes over at the best time to get these two back on track, with Jaime finally getting the generator running. We have light. With some doors now accessible, Jaime stumbles upon a key to the suspended container with the name F. Stone on it. They get to the container with a little jump, even though somehow Robert almost doesn't make it. They see the container has smashed through a wall into a hidden room. Inside the room is a complete horror show. We are talking body parts inside of jars. Classic serial killer stuff. This is the machine shop that Chris has been searching for, and it even contains the personal journal of Frank Stone. Within the journal are names of numerous victims, with different weapons and descriptions of what he wants to do. To feel every blow and to taste their fear. Guy was a proper nutcase. The weapons also line up with the symbols that were found on the walls within the tunnels. Now, Frank Stone might be a lunatic serial killer, but I must say he has a future art degree waiting for him in the afterlife with these drawings like this. You have to respect it. He knows his shadows. We can also find a newspaper speaking about the murder of George Calhoun and his friend Joyce Barton at Hawkline Point. This murder was never officially linked to Frank Stone, since the police likely never even found this machine room, which I must say is some terrible police work, since this whole steel mill should be a crime scene, and every inch of this place should have been searched thoroughly. But sure, Sheriff Lloyd Kusich was the one that began the homicide investigation into the deaths, and you might remember the name of George Calhoun. This is the son of the drugstore owner, and also the young man mentioned in the self-help book in the Rivera's garage. where the author saw George middle-aged within the vision of his alternate reality. George and Joyce died after their car crashed and caught fire. However, police were able to determine that George's car was stationary when it left the road, indicating involvement of a third party. These jars are full of all kinds of nasty surprises, including a human head of one of Frank's victims that has been very well preserved for 20 years. He states that this is no longer harmless fun and he needs to notify his dad about what they found. Jaime tries to stop him, but Robert reminds them both that there is no statute of limitations on murder, and they are now currently tampering with evidence. Chris agrees with Robert and tells him to find the sheriff. He uses a hatch to get down, which is again a nod to the hatches in the entity's realm. They get down, and we can see that Chris has literally packed the human hand in her backpack and is in the process of filming the hand for her movie. Jesus, it's like she wants to get arrested. Not to mention the morality of it. The filming of the hand stirs up some strange green energy we saw in the furnace room, causing it all to swell towards the camera. The hand falls down on its own and lets out a surge of energy that knocks Chris and Jaime to the ground. When it all converges, it creates a being and a portal. At first I joked about how it actually looked like the portals that Rick uses in the Rick and Morty show, but it's not. A new creature is standing nearby and Jaime must make the critical decision: help his girlfriend that is getting sucked into an interdimensional portal, or run for the hills. He chose wisely. Now you might wonder why he didn't help. This is critical to get the canon ending I was alluding to earlier. You'll see. Chris gets pulled into the portal as we cut back to the 2024 group within the Manor as they are trying to figure out how to open up the door. Maddie believes that there might be some clues lying around on how to open it, which seems incredibly odd to me, since why would you leave clues on how to open a secret door when you are the only person that you want opening your secret door in your own home? Stan conveniently knows how to open the gate to the upper floor using the hole within the door, something that Linda points out is quite strange and it's almost like he knew. Upstairs we find yet another creepy doll, this time Susie Lavoie, one of the 4 Legion killers that inhabit the entity's domain. There is a book that contains a written review for the Murder Mill film when it aired at the film festival. They were not a fan at first, saying that its composition was unskillful, and that the cinematics were the equivalent of kids putting on a play for the family before Thanksgiving. But what truly shocked the reviewer was the unusual, oddly unsettling feeling that blanketed the 10 PM audience from the very first frame, something they can't explain. We find a key that unlocks a cabinet downstairs, containing a diorama of Max Thompson, the hillbilly killer, and the Coldwind Farm behind him. With the help of a tree and placing a hammer in the grips of the hillbilly, we get ourselves the key to the door. Another interesting Easter egg here is the central painting hanging up within the room, but this painting actually depicts Kamina Mora, the artist killer within the entity's domain. She is the one within the domain most directly linked with crows. We get the door open and find ourselves within a kind of museum-esque setup. Nothing like a room like this to really drive home how poor you really are. You see a return of the Huntress's bunny mask that we previously saw at the Curiosity Store in 1980, further showing that the store owner and Augustine are the same person after all. We have an Akkadian demon statue. This is very likely a nod to the dark anthology series House of Ashes, where we can see similar statues depicted in the ruins, and also the Epic of Gilgamesh book that we saw earlier, of a person trying to teach a religious perspective. Speaking of books, we can find a book on the coffee table called Fold of Fear. It seems to depict a creature on the front that looks an awful lot like the Dredge Killer found in the entity's domain. Within the story is a young woman called Beatrice that is running through the woods at night from a creature. It mentions how all she could hear while running was the cackling of crows that almost sounded like mocking laughter as she ran for her life. She mentions somebody called Stamper, who had inflicted damage on the Fold, a settlement where Stamper's creature had risen. Now this is actually confirmation that the creature depicted is the Dredge Killer, since the lore is directly connected with it. Another neat nod. And that's not the only nod. If we take a look at the table with the book on it, we can see 3 playing cards. The Death card is using the likeness of Talbot Grimes, the Blight Killer, while the Fool card is showing Jeffrey Hawke, the Clown Killer. The Wheel of Fortune card, however, seems to be showing the Observer, a person that would narrate the Dead by Daylight lore. Oh, there are so many goddamn Easter eggs that even the Huntress would struggle. We can find a recording of a news reporter that is describing some events that took place in the movie theatre while Murder Mill was being screened. I will play it in its entirety since it's pretty interesting.
I am speaking from the Tradewinds movie theater on Texas Avenue, where we are witnessing some sort of protest, or I don't know. All I am able to report at this point is there have been several attacks on the general public as well as police and medical personnel. It's not overly clear, at least to us, what the catalyst for the situation was, but I can confirm that it started in the cinema itself, as it has been reported an employee was stomped to death during a showing of Murder Mill. From here I can see considerable damage done all around us, and police are currently doing their best to control this crowd. Okay. Oh no, okay, now there is an arrest taking place, and several people are moving in, storming the officers at every side. Oh my god. Oh my god! Okay, that was an explosion. I can't see. I can't see. The police have now opened fire. It now sounds like the police line has been broken. I can't see anything. Oh my god!
Holy shit.
Yeah. Thank God movie ticket prices are so overpriced these days, because I would never be caught in a situation like this. Linda meets back up with Stan and baits him into essentially admitting that he hasn't watched a single one of Linda's films. He admits that he is more of a fan of her reputation, rather than her films. A nearby desk contains the creepiest piece in the entire museum, the original movie camera that the Murder Mill crew used. This is the one that the group left with the Curiosity store owner. See, I knew they shouldn't have left that there. Now we're all getting spooked out by it. Maddie calls Linda over to take a look at a book in one of the displays. It shows a necklace that is described in the book as a talisman. This is awfully familiar to the one found by Sam Green in the tunnels of 63. The book states that violence, pain, fear, sacrifice, and hope that's been brutally snatched away hold the most potent psychic energies, and thus gifts of fortune will manifest within the keepsakes of past victims, offering the wearer protective powers. Now, the word protective is circled with a bunch of question marks around, so it seems that even Augustine isn't buying this BS. We hear the sound of the elevator behind us as our uninvited visitor from outside seems to have found his way into the building. He gives Stan a swift left hook, which already makes this dude my favourite character in the story. We do get to see that this invader is none other than Sam Green. We waste no time cutting back to 1980, now with Linda and Bonnie outside after they split with Chris, Jaime, and Robert. The two are basically talking about the family dynamic. Bonnie wants Jaime to move away from Cedar after he graduates, and to grow up a little bit, while she suggests Linda do the same, saying that she only really realised how big the world was after she left Cedar, and she went to live in New York. We find out that Bonnie was dating a girl within the band that she was a part of in New York, but when she had to move back to Cedar to help her father and sick mother, the band moved on without her. The talk finishes up with a little tension between Linda and Bonnie, but it doesn't go far before they decide they have to head back inside. Jaime runs out screaming, explaining what happened to Chris in the portal, and the hidden room of Frank Stone before falling to his knees, explaining how Chris is now gone. Bonnie takes him outside for some fresh air, while Linda goes in search for Chris, alone. I admire the bravery. While Linda takes a look around, we can come across yet another creepy doll, this one being Jeffrey Hawk, the clown killer. He even has human fingers attached to him. Once Linda arrives back to where Chris was taken, she can find the camera sitting on the floor. She decides to pick it up and return to Jaime and Bonnie, hoping that the camera will provide some clues to what actually happened to Chris. Jaime is having a straight up panic attack as a burst of energy erupts nearby. Linda takes a look through the camera and can see a whole lot of danger coming directly towards them. They make a break for it as Linda gets separated, forced to use the camera on the creature, which surprisingly acts like a repellent when exposed to the film for long enough. Linda gets one of those trusty generators working again and uses the lift to get back outside. We jump back to 2024 as Stan is still recovering from getting clocked. Linda points out how it's been a good, 20 years since she last saw him, saying how spry he is for an old man. He tells her that there is no time to waste and that they need to talk. We learn that he is now the former sheriff, no longer holding the position, and is frustrated with Linda since he is constantly having to clean up after her love child, meaning the Murder Mill movie, saying that it should have just stayed forgotten, because it could spell the end of the world, or even others. It seems Sam also buys into the whole Omniverse theory. Nice. Linda again denies that it's actually cursed, which surprises Sam after everything that happened in 1980, realizing that Linda isn't remembering all of the details for some reason. He asks if everybody still has their piece of the film, which all of them confirm, but they do mention how Augustine made them all an offer. Sam is relieved, saying that there might still be time. He explains that the film strip that each of them are carrying is a prison to something much older and powerful than anything humanity has ever conceived. It's pure malignant corruption. Stan gets smart with Sam, and it's revealed that the two have come to blows in the past. Stan jokes that Sam is looking much better than the last time he saw him, while Sam points out that Stan manipulated his son Robert and stole his piece of the film when Robert was in a vulnerable place in his life. Stan argues that he has always done business legitimate and storms out of the room. Maddie follows him into the hallways while Linda and Sam stay in the museum area. Down the end of one of the corridors is a television, and when you look inside of it, it's none other than the Curiosity Shop. And if you remember, we saw this exact angle with Chris when we were inside the Curiosity Shop, meaning that these televisions are linked together through time. Maddie turns off the television and the hallways behind her completely change, showing a different layout than before. We come across a painting that depicts a hooded figure, likely Augustine, praying to some kind of god with lots of spider legs with victims hooked to them, this being the entity. We head down a green-lit hallway and stumble into one incredibly designed room. You know, it always makes me wonder with mysterious rooms like this in mansions. Like, this is clearly the room that was depicted on the blueprint in the security room. But who built this engineering marvel? Are they dead now? Did Augustine build this? I need to know. We hear the yells of a woman coming from the center, asking for help. Maddie does some puzzles and manages to shut down the machine. Inside is our 80s friend Chris. Hell yeah, time travel's on the cards, baby. This will totally not be 1,000 times more difficult to explain than the normal non-time travel based story. Not at all. No. We jump back to the 1980s. This time on Main Street at the center of Cedar. Robert is running down the street and stops in front of the Curiosity Shop. The store owner, or rather Augustine, asks him if everything is alright. Robert tells her that he is looking for his father, and Augustine gives him an absolute masterclass on how to answer in the most annoying way possible. Have you seen the sheriff? Yes. Here and there, now and then. How long ago was he here? It was more than a minute, less than a lifetime. I think I would lose my collective mind. As Robert accepts defeat and moves on, Augustine whispers that she will let Sam know that Robert is looking for him in a very, very creepy manner. We now return back to Linda in 2024. Sam is angry at Linda, asking what Augustine could possibly have offered her to come here. Linda responds that she was promised her freedom. She explains that it has been torture for her ever since they made Murder Mill, having constant nightmares and never being able to sleep, using that torment to push it into her films, but it's been 30 years. And she just can't do it anymore. She tells Sam that Maddie is Bonnie's daughter and that Bonnie recently passed away, wishing that she could have spent more time or kept in touch with her, but doesn't have the chance anymore. Maddie has Bonnie's piece of the film, Stan has Robert's, and Linda has her own original piece. Sam states that the reason that he is here is because of what happened at Cedar Hills, and what happened in 1980. Linda points out that the steel mill has been gone for decades, so how is it still an issue? Sam gets frustrated, saying that he doesn't count the years anymore. He suddenly collapses, sweating profusely and mentioning how he needs to find them all before the skies fold in again. To be honest, it looks like he's having a heart attack. Linda points out that he is not okay, but Sam is determined to find Augustine regardless. The walls begin to shift in the building as Sam is gone from view. Linda heads into a nearby room filled with thousands of film reels. It seems Augustine is quite the collector. On one of the shelves is an arm and blood movie gag. What is creepy, however, is that it looks very similar to the prop that the Murder Mill crew used when filming their movie, but it is slightly different. We can also find a crate filled with staff shirts that the crew wore back in 1980, but with one big difference. The name of this film was Murder Mine instead of Murder Mill. A newspaper describes an incident at a theatre that was blamed on a sick flick in 1984. Mass violence and pandemonium erupted around the country during screenings of Murder Mill. Linda points out that these screenings never happened. We get another creepy doll, this time Sally Smithson, the nurse killer within the entity's realm. Linda finds a film reel and begins watching it. It's the scene that they filmed in the furnace room, but it depicts Bonnie acting, not Chris. Oh, Bonnie says hi, by the way. A quick look at the surrounding films reveals a horrifying truth. They are not thousands of different film reels. They are thousands of murder mill film reels from different timelines and realities. This causes Linda to panic as Sam arrives. Linda tells Sam to explain what the hell is going on and that she won't help him any further until he does. He warns her that she might not like what he has to say, but she tells him to say it anyway, pointing out the fact that Sam hasn't been direct with her since he arrived, not to mention a giant elephant in the room. Linda picked up on it back at the museum, but Sam should be at least 80 years old right now, but he's barely older than her. He might be Sam Green, but he is not the Sam Green that she knew in Cedar Hills. He is a different person. Now, this is a little bit of an insert, since I didn't get this the first time I played, but if you read Sam's diary when he fell over when he was ill, you will see a name called Logan Chen. Linda can ask Sam about Logan, and he explains how he thought everything was over with when he killed Stone in 1963, but nothing has been normal in his world ever since that night, since he stopped him. But he caught a glimpse of the bigger picture in the process. Stone was only a piece of something much worse. He felt that he only delayed the inevitable and did research. The same research that Robert mentioned in the tunnels. This led him to Logan Chen of the Imperati. They explained what he saw and told him what he needed to do and what he needed to leave behind. Now the lore is deep on the Imperati, but I don't want to go over it here. Maybe in a Dead by Daylight lore video if that's something that people would like to see. But for anyone out of the loop, the Imperati is essentially a group that fights back against the entity and will do anything that they can to do so. Also, if you're watching after all this time, thank you so very much. And comment Imperati down below to let me know. I really appreciate it. Alright, back to the video. We get some more narration from Augustine as she explains how the Omniverse works. For every path, there is another taken by a shadow self, different realities that are so close in detail that they bleed into each other. Augustine chose these timelines because they were special. The bleed was strong as the entity strained against the edges of the world. She didn't need Frank Stone. She only needed his essence that is trapped in the celluloid. With this, he can be reborn. We jump back on board with young Linda, as she is still trying to regroup with Jaime and Bonnie. She stumbles across some of the previous lockers used by the employees of the mill. Within one of these lockers is the personal belongings of a person named Franklin Norman. This is likely the same Norman that was spoken to in the Epic of Gilgamesh book. The writer mentions how upset it makes them when Norman doesn't write back to them, saying that they will always be there for them and nothing in the world could stop them from loving him. She brings up the fact that Norman mentioned how he is struggling to make new friends and begins complaining about a woman named Marie, saying that whenever she opens her mouth it's like insects are crawling under your skin. We can deduce that Franklin Norman is Frank Stone, and that his grandmother has caused him to be psychologically unhinged from a tough upbringing. We continue to try and find the exit and stumble across a hidden room after crawling through the tunnels, and it contains some pretty nightmarish drawings on the wall, depicting the entity and victims. Linda finds Frank Stone's personal journal that contains his thoughts briefly before the events in 63. I will read it in its entirety as I feel it gives us a better idea of who he really is. November 12th, 1962. I have not heard from her. I did as instructed, but for weeks I've been left alone. Have I failed? Did I not perform my purpose as I was told? 5 names I have taken, but I feel no closer to the path. And now she's stopped giving me more. Am I finished? Is there no more evil left to conquer? How am I to know if I am ready? I do not feel it. Every night I dream of the forest, of the darkness all around me. I am afraid, too scared to move forward or cry out, because it stands beyond the fog. Sometimes I can see their shapeless forms walking in the flames like snakes. This hiss of their screams burns my ears. If they are evil, why do they scream? Should they feel such fear? When their death is righteous? Do they mock me to make me doubt? I think of Dorothy, how she slept. She did not seem evil to me. Her face was cold. It reminded me of Ma. How can I know the difference? Ma was not evil. What made Dorothy different? I think of that pig George and his Joyce, how they wallowed in each other's sin with such pleasure and felt no uncertainty with them. I am conflicted, and it frustrates me. How am I to know evil alone? How can I be sure that Cedar Hills has not been lost to sin? Should I not destroy them all, purge the town completely? I stand alone in the forest, waiting to reach the other side. If I cry out, I will be lost. I will wait. The first thing is clear. The her that Stone is referring to is Augustine. And what is interesting is that it seems like she was the one picking out each of his victims. Stone also dreamt of the forest, much like Maddie has, but his perspective is a little bit different to Maddie's. Stone sees shape near the flames, which would lead us to believe that he is seeing the forest from the perspective of the killer. We know in Dead by Daylight that survivors gather around the campfire while the killer looks on from the woods. Stone struggles to discern if they're evil since they scream, asking if their death isn't righteous. Stone believes that with each kill he is following a higher calling. There was also mention of Dorothy, George and Joyce, 3 of his victims, and some that we have seen in the newspapers. 8th of January 1963. Finally she has come back to me, and she is happy. I have well exceeded her expectations. She is more certain now that I am worthy, and that the path through the forest will reveal itself to me. She says that she has found the root of evil, the source of rot that has eaten the town. I sit beneath its very foundations. Howard Tester is the leader of a wicked coven. From him the branches of evil stretch out and infect everything, but he is beyond my righteous judgment. Although he rots in the pits of hell, his spawn still lingers here. They are destined for evil that outweighs what I have dealt with before, just as I am destined to stop them. This is my calling. DP, BK, LR, JR. 4 names, 4 more trials that I must conquer. She tells me not to rush. I cannot make a mistake. I will not fail. I will use the very first thing that Tester birthed to carry out my task. I will turn his creation into the thing that destroys his legacy. I will purify it as I will this town. She tells me not to doubt what I dream of, to embrace the fog and the fire as one, to become Enkidu. I must let go of my doubts and mold myself with that part of myself I fear. Man and beast, metal and flesh, bound by fire. Then I will reach the other side and see what it is to be eternal, to be divine. I know what it is to believe. Though the forest path is clear and the fire waits for me, I will not be afraid. Now, Howard Tester is mentioned by Frank. You might remember back when we saw the public critique of the steel mill hiring Stone. We could see back then that the Tester family were the ones that owned the steel mill and hired Stone despite his violent record. Howard Kinsley Tester founded the mill in 1921, and the mill produced high-quality steel throughout the nation during the wartime period. So Stone uses the mill specifically because of its connection with Tester. We enter Stone's hidden room, and it's all kinds of messed up. Inside is another creepy doll, Herman Carter, the doctor killer in the entity's domain. We can find the will of one of Stone's victims, Dwight Allen Parker, likely the DP described in Stone's journal, and also mentioned in the book Within the Machine Shop. He describes how he was drinking down by the Cedar Creek with friends when he got so drunk that he refused to go home. His friends left him to sober up, and when he awoke, he saw a large figure watching him. After a brief fight, Dwight was easily overpowered and wound up in this room. Linda returns to the furnace room as we now jump on board with Chris, who has now arrived in 2024. Chris is understandably distressed and mistakes Maddie for Bonnie. Maddie explains that her mother was Bonnie and asks if Chris knows her. Chris mentions that she is the sister of her boyfriend Jaime, which shocks Maddie, asking if she's talking about her uncle Jaime. Stan arrives and is saying that something is trying to kill him. He asks who the hell Chris is, and they try to determine how she got here. Maddie wonders if they could activate the machine to send her back. We need to have another big decision here for Chris. To get the ending that I mentioned earlier, Chris will refuse to return out of fear of the creature that was on the other side of the portal. Alarms begin to sound as the group decide to leave. Maddie states that they need to find Linda. Chris immediately asks if she is talking about Linda Castle, and asks to see her. The portal opens up once again as a hooded figure appears and the group make a run for it back into the manor. We now return to 1980 with Linda in the furnace room as Jaime and Bonnie reunite with her. Frank's ghost was attacking them outside and they must find a way out, opting to find a way back through the storm drain. A loud roar can be heard as Stone is approaching the furnace room. We now cut back to the manor. Maddie, Stan and Chris are looking for whatever was attacking Stan, while Stan points out that everything at the manor was normal before the sheriff showed up. Maddie doesn't think that he has anything to do with it. But Chris asks the group if they're talking about Sheriff Sam Green, again pleading to take her to him. We go searching and find a bedroom. Within it contains a music box with a familiar person inside as the dancer. This is Ji Woon Hak, the trickster killer, that is within the entity's domain. We also find a book that contains a key to the music box, but also an interesting occult page. It mentions how blood is what binds us to the world and that the spilling of one's blood would result in them moving into the next, and questions the idea that the soul shedding may draw the gaze of a higher reality. So is it not the act of taking life that brings the worlds together, rather than the passage of souls? If this is true, we could form our own gates between the worlds and pass through them while we live. Imagine the knowledge that is only locked away by a single sacrifice. There is a locket sitting on the bedside table, very similar to the one that we saw in the book within the museum. Chris recognizes it as being the same one that belonged to Frank Stone's victim. Maddie points out how the book said it offers protection of some kind. This immediately gets the interest of Stan, as he asks for the locket since he almost died already. We reluctantly agree to give him the locket, a very important choice by the way, and one that we need to do in order to reach the ending that I'm hoping for. Downstairs is a recording of an interview conducted by Dr. Augustine Lieber and patient Frank Stone, while she was his doctor in the clinic. It is dated the 28th of March 1961. Maddie puts two and two together, and realizes quickly that there is no way that Augustine is conducting this interview, since it would be 60 years ago. Lieber asks Stone if he ever feels that he has a higher calling, saying that she believes that his acts of violence mean something, and that his future is boundless if he only trusts her. We get ourselves another creepy doll, this time Charlotte and Victor Deshays, the twin killers within the entity's realm. Oh my, how many panels of glass is that? I won't lie, I would hate that room with all my being. Imagine watching movies at night and all around you is the open outside, where anybody could be watching. Hell no. Sam and Linda arrive and Maddie tries to let her know about Chris, but quickly warns Maddie how Sam Green is an imposter before she has a chance to finish. Sam reiterates his point about realities and how Augustine is not just collecting their pieces of film, but every single murder mill film ever created. Chris arrives and is shocked to see Linda and Sam, saying how she was just with them at the mill, and can't believe how old Linda is. Sam hits us with the, oh crap, and explains that this kind of thing can happen sometimes. A film begins playing on the projector. Murder Mill's in session, folks. Sam quickly asks Linda, Maddie and Stan to show him their film strips, only for them to realize that they're missing. Augustine did the old swapperoo on them back when they first met. Stan, on the other hand, reveals that he had made a secret deal with Augustine prior to Maddie and Linda even arriving at the manor. Augustine paid him extra to stick around and to keep them company. He never had the film on him from the beginning. Linda wonders why Augustine wants to keep them here, if she has had the film pieces this entire time. We cut back to the mill in 1980 as Stone is quickly approaching the group. Jaime gets thrown to the ground, and Linda has to act quickly with the camera, buying enough time. Bonnie is also knocked to the ground, but is quickly grabbed by Stone, impaled on a nearby hook before Linda can do anything. The hook went straight through her heart, and Bonnie dies on the hook. The crew in 2024 watched these events unfold on the film, with Linda stating that this never happened. Remember, Bonnie only recently died for Maddie, so this isn't an alternate version of events that they are witnessing. Maddie begins to cry watching her mother be killed, as Linda attempts to comfort her. Augustine arrives and locks them all in the room while they watch on in horror. We now cut back to Robert after he filled his father in on what happened at the machine shop, as they hear screams within the steel mill. Sam immediately senses that something is wrong and jumps into action. Inside the furnace room, he finds Bonnie suspended in the air. They hear the roars of Stone from the storm drain below as Sam tells Robert to stay here, stating that whatever is down there is far too dangerous for him to put Robert in the firing line. Robert feels that this is all his fault since he guided them in here, but Sam doesn't change his mind, going into the tunnels alone. He finds their camera on the ground and runs towards the screams of Linda and Jaime. Sam points out how the atmosphere doesn't feel right, that it feels like 1963 when Stone was here. We find Jaime impaled on a pipe through the stomach. Sam helps him off while Stone attacks again, fending him off again with the camera. Sam asks where the others are, and Jaime states that Bonnie and Chris are gone, and that Linda chased after it with the camera but they lost each other. Sam tells Jaime to stay here while he searches for Linda. A bold move since there is still a raging ghost monster popping up everywhere, but every man fends for himself, I guess. We traverse through the tunnels and find Linda, looking like she just went 12 rounds with Mike Tyson in the ring. Damn. Stone arrives as Sam once again uses the camera. This time, however, the camera appears to be pulling Stone into it. Robert arrives and is told to stay back while Sam deals with Stone. He does help get Linda to safety in the meantime as Jaime arrives also. The ghost of Frank Stone is sucked into the camera and Sam is thrown to the ground, helped up by his son. Robert asks if it's finally over, but Sam replies that it isn't, only one thing left to do, and Frank Stone is less than pleased. We cut back to 2024 with the footage that we just saw taking place. Maddie calls Augustine out for taking advantage of her after her mother just died, with Augustina replying that a traveller is only as strong as its vessel. The same exact line that we saw in the picture over the woman at the curiosity shop. Stone begins coming through the projector. Now I have heard of 5D films, but this is a little too realistic for my liking. He grabs Stan by the neck as the group fails to pull him free. Stan literally calls out to his mummy, which I can hardly blame him for, to be honest, given the circumstances. Stone then turns him into a pretzel, consuming him in the most gory way possible. Ladies and gentlemen, you have the final version of Frank Stone in all of his killer glory. We can see Stan trying to yell out for help within Stone, but he is pushed back inside. The group makes a run for it, splitting up in the process. Linda and Maddie attempt to start the elevator, only to realise that there is no power. It's generator time, baby. We get it back up and running as the power is now back online. The elevator is working again, but Frank Stone comes bursting through the wall, hurting Maddie. Linda attempts to help her, but is about to be killed by Stone until Stan interrupts him and buys them enough time. Linda puts Maddie in the elevator while she distracts Stone. Maddie ends up back in the time travel room, where Augustine is hiding. Augustine tells Maddie that she can make her nightmares, trauma and pain go away, only if she tells her that she wants it. It doesn't take long, however, for Maddie to tell Augustine to shove it where the sun don't shine, and Maddie leaves, ending up in the museum. I swear Stone loves making a grand entrance as he smashes through the wall once again. Some close calls later, and Sam buys Maddie enough time to leave the manor. He tells Frank that he has already killed him once and he'll do it again if he has the chance. Again, there are some very close calls, but he is able to make his way out of the manor. Meanwhile, in the projector room, Chris is taking a look at the footage that Stone came out of, realizing that it's a kind of portal of its own. She must make a choice, push through the portal or stay in the current time. For this, Chris will choose to stay in the current timeline, finding a way out of the manor. We have some more narration from Augustine as she proclaims Frank Stone her champion, a killer worthy of the entity. She has created the bleed between the worlds, and now everything will be swallowed by the entity's power. She now wonders what she will get for providing this to the entity, wanting knowledge and glory. She has successfully brought the entity to this world. We can see Augustine leaving the manor, basking in her own work. The entity has arrived. She cannot believe the perfection before her eyes as her killer Frank Stone joins her. Augustine offers her sacrifices and asks the entity for her reward for loyal service. Stone, however, has different ideas, stabbing her in the neck and nodding towards the entity. The entity takes Augustine as a sacrifice from Stone, seemingly being accepted by the entity as a new killer. Maddie attempts to make a break for it, using her car, but it won't start. Bad time for a flat battery, let me tell you. She runs into the woods on foot, glancing at the new godlike horror in the skies. She prays to her mother for some help and begins seeing visions of the pharmacy. She can see the events that take place after the teens return from the steel mill. The group decides to develop the film, to be certain that they have trapped Frank Stone within it. After watching it, they confirm that he is actually within the film and all agree to separate it into small segments. Each person gets a piece. They need to keep the pieces as far away from each other as humanly possible, and to never let them come back together ever again. Sam tells the teens to go on and live their lives. Forget about the events at the steel mill. He will be responsible for Chris and Bonnie, and to speak about this to nobody. We can see a door, the same door that Maddie exited from within her dream. Behind the door is our last creepy doll, this one of Ji-Woon Hak, the trickster killer. We see a familiar entrance as Maddie finds herself at the same campsite as her dream. Waiting there is Linda, Sam and Chris. Sam is relieved that everybody made it out, but wonders why everybody's just waiting at the campsite. Why haven't they left to find help? We see that Frank Stone is walking through the woods, seeing the shadows dance among the flames, watching them. We know that this lines up perfectly with the dreams that Frank Stone described, but this time he is no longer afraid. He knows what he must do. This is also a familiar sight for Dead by Daylight fans, since this is what happens before every single trial begins, with the killer watching from the woods stalking the survivors around the campfire. Maddie attempts to flee, but Linda stops her. telling her that everybody has now arrived and they can now begin. Maddie states that she wants to go home, but Linda reminds her that this is all there is now. Augustine narrates one final time, saying whether that you're surviving or killing, the entity will play with our souls for eternity, an endless hunt of fear, pain and sacrifice where death is no escape. Let the trials begin. A post-credit scene shows us the time travel room once again, as a new person arrives within the manor. It is none other than a young Augustine Lieber, welcomed by the older Augustine Lieber who arrived before. We get a look at a brand new creepy doll, that of Frank Stone, who has now received his killer name from the entity, the Champion. And that ends the story of the casting of Frank Stone. What a ride! Now, the reason I chose this ending, believing it to be the canon ending, is due to the fact that this is the only way that you can have 4 survivors sitting around the campfire, just like Dead by Daylight. If Maddie, Linda, Chris or Sam die, the spots will be taken by the original Dead by Daylight cast instead. And while everyone survived that could survive, I wouldn't exactly call this the happy ending, but it is the Dead by Daylight ending. Now, I did state at the beginning of the video that I wanted to show some interesting alternative endings and plot points. We'll make this quick. Let's begin with the necklace. It's mentioned by the book to be a protective talisman of some kind. We gave this to Stan, and you can see how he ended up. If you give this to Maddie or Chris, they will automatically be mind controlled by Augustine, resulting in them being killed by Stone one way or another. Also, when Chris was about to make her exit through the projector, you would think that it would be a good idea for her to return to her timeline. But do you remember when we haggled with the Curiosity Store owner and received that pocket mirror as an addition? Chris intended to use it as a prop in the movie. Well, that thing is cursed and will kill Chris as she attempts to cross through the projector. I'm still a little confused why this didn't work when she went into 2024, but now you know. If you didn't haggle and never received the pocket mirror, Chris can return back to her timeline, but this will put her back when the group were filming their initial scenes prior to Sam Green telling them off for going to the steel mill. And lastly, a secret ending. If none of Linda, Sam, Chris, Maddie survive till the end, you will instead see the ending through the first-person perspective of Frank Stone, the same as you would if you chose to be a killer instead of a survivor in Dead by Daylight. There are many other cool deviations in the story that you could probably experience for yourself, but far too many to cover in this one video. But that is going to wrap things up for this one. Let me know if you would like to see a Dead by Daylight lore video at some stage, like I said before. I appreciate everybody that's watched, and I apologize for the lack of videos over the previous 4 months. A lot has been going on in my life recently, but I am happy to say that I am now able to get back into videos on a regular basis, which I missed tremendously. So expect more very soon. Be sure to like the video if you enjoyed it, as it helps me out a bunch, and of course subscribe to be notified of all my future lore projects. Until next time guys, peace.